stole a bit from my father, who, lost a lot of the people who would have gone to see him and talk to him. And
For years, the royal family's most private struggles have stayed behind closed doors, but now all that is about to change. In a rare and emotional moment, Princess Anne decided to spill the truth behind Prince Philip's separation from the Queen. Surprisingly, the real reason isn't the fairy tale we were all led to believe, and this sudden revelation has left the royal family deeply shaken. Join us as we delve into one of the monarchy's most closely guarded secrets. Balancing two different worlds. Prince Philip was born on June 10, 1921. He was the only son and the fifth child of Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark and Princess Alice of Battenberg. His father came from Greek royalty, being the fourth son of King George I of Greece and Queen Olga. His mother came from British and German nobility. She was the eldest daughter of Louis Mountbatten, the first Marquis of Milford Haven, and Victoria Mountbatten. His family background made him a prince of both Greece and Denmark. However, despite this noble heritage, Philip's early life was full of difficulties. His family faced political trouble and personal hardship. After a period of exile, they settled in Saint-Cloud, a quiet suburb near Paris. They lived in a house provided by Philip's aunt, Princess George of Greece and Denmark. Life in exile was not easy, but the family tried to adjust. Philip was sent to the Elms, an American school in Paris. He did well in his studies and was known for being intelligent and respectful. By 1930, Philip's life took another major turn. At just 9 years old, he moved to the United Kingdom. There, he lived with his maternal grandmother at Kensington Palace. He also spent time with his uncle George Mountbatten at Linden Manor in Bray, a peaceful area in Berkshire. He started attending Cheam School, a respected institution. During these years, Philip's life became even more unstable. His 4 sisters married German princes and moved to Germany. His mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia and placed in an asylum. His father left for Monte Carlo and became distant from family life. These events left young Philip without a stable home, and he grew up with little contact with his parents. In 1933, Philip was sent to Schule Schloss Salem, a progressive school in Germany. It had been founded by Kurt Hahn, an educator with strong ideals. Eventually, when the Nazi Party began rising to power, Hahn, who opposed them, fled the country. Philip left the school after 2 terms and followed Hahn's educational vision to Scotland, enrolling at Gordonstoun School, which Hahn had established there. Gordonstoun offered a tough but character-building environment. The school focused on discipline, outdoor life, and resilience. It became an important place for Philip, helping shape his values and his sense of responsibility. Although Philip was born in Greece, he never spoke Greek fluently. His time there had been so short that the language never became part of his life. He understood some of it, but mostly spoke English. Over time, he grew closer to his Danish roots and identified more with British culture. His upbringing reflected many cultures and languages, and this made him adaptable and strong. His childhood had been full of change, but it prepared him for the very public life he would eventually lead. Despite being surrounded by constant change and family difficulties, Philip stayed focused on his education and personal development. These years, though lonely at times, gave him the strength and independence that would define his character. His future role in the British royal family began taking shape during these years. It was around this time in 1934 when Philip first met Princess Elizabeth. They came in contact during a royal wedding. His cousin, Princess Marina of Greece, married Elizabeth's uncle, the Duke of Kent. At the time, Philip was a teenager, and Elizabeth was still a young girl. Their real connection started 5 years later in 1939, when Elizabeth visited the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. Philip was training there as a naval cadet. He stood out immediately. Full of energy and confidence, he impressed everyone around him. Elizabeth, only 13 at the time, found him exciting and interesting. That visit began a bond that slowly deepened through letters and occasional meetings. Philip had a bold, straightforward way about him. He was active, honest, and had a sharp sense of humor. These qualities made him different from many others around the royal family. Elizabeth, more quiet and thoughtful, seemed drawn to this contrast. Over time, their friendship turned into love. Even with their different backgrounds, they balanced each other well. They stayed in contact during the war years, writing letters to each other, keeping their connection alive despite the distance and the demands of their roles. As their bond grew stronger, problems also appeared. Philip's background caused concern among some royal advisors. He was foreign-born, had no steady income, and his sisters were married to German nobles who had links to the Nazi Party. This made many people uncomfortable, especially in the years right after World War II. There were doubts about whether he was the right match for Elizabeth. Even within the royal family, not everyone supported the relationship. Some believed Philip lacked the status and background expected of someone who would marry the future queen. Still, Elizabeth stood firm. She had made up her mind. In 1946, Philip proposed to her, and she accepted. They kept the engagement private until Elizabeth turned 21 the next year. When it was finally announced, it became a major event. Their romance had caught the public's attention, and their engagement brought a sense of excitement and hope to Britain. After years of war and loss, people were ready for a story of love and renewal. On November 20th, 1947, they were married in Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was grand and full of tradition. It was also the first royal wedding to be broadcast on television, watched by millions. It became a symbol of recovery for a country still healing from the effects of World War II. Philip gave up his Greek and Danish titles, took on the last name Mountbatten, and was made the Duke of Edinburgh. From that day forward, he fully embraced his new role in British life, standing beside Elizabeth as her partner. Transitioning into royal life after the wedding celebration, life began to unfold. For Philip, this was the start of a completely different phase. He had stepped into a world shaped by royal customs and expectations, something he had never truly experienced before. Elizabeth, on the other hand, had grown up with these rules. She had always known that one day she would become queen. Her path had been clear from childhood, carefully prepared and shaped for leadership. But for Philip, joining the royal family meant entering a world where he had to learn fast and adjust even faster. The early years of their marriage were filled with change. Between 1949 and 1951, they lived in Malta, where Philip served in the Royal Navy. Those years gave them a rare sense of peace and normalcy. Life in Malta was quieter, more relaxed, and far from the public eye. There were no constant duties or crowds watching their every move. For once, they could live like an ordinary couple, enjoying their time together with a kind of freedom they would rarely experience again. Unfortunately, that peaceful chapter came to an end in 1952. Elizabeth's father, King George VI, passed away suddenly, and everything changed. Elizabeth became queen at just 25 years old, and the weight of the crown fell heavily on her shoulders. With her new role came enormous responsibility, and the quiet life they had enjoyed disappeared almost overnight. Along with the royal title came a difficult debate. What name would the royal house carry now that Elizabeth was queen? Traditionally, a woman would take her husband's surname. Following this, there were suggestions that the royal house should be renamed. Lord Mountbatten, Philip's uncle, proposed the name House of Mountbatten. Philip himself supported the idea of calling it the House of Edinburgh, based on his title as Duke of Edinburgh. But these ideas were quickly stopped. Queen Mary, Elizabeth's grandmother, made sure Prime Minister Winston Churchill knew her thoughts. Soon, Elizabeth was advised to officially declare that the royal house would remain the House of Windsor. This decision deeply upset Philip. He felt ignored and powerless in a world that placed tradition over personal connection. He wasn't even allowed to pass his own name on to his children. Though he rarely spoke about it publicly, it was something that clearly bothered him. It wasn't until 1960, just before the birth of their third child, Prince Andrew, that a change was finally made. Elizabeth issued an order in council declaring that any of their male-line descendants who were not royal princes or princesses would carry the surname Mountbatten-Windsor. It was a quiet but important change that allowed Philip's name to be recognized within the family line. This shift came after months of letters and arguments, especially from a constitutional expert who worried that, without this change, the royal children could be seen as illegitimate. Prime Minister Harold Macmillan pushed back against these claims, but in the end, the Queen made the decision. Soon after becoming Queen, Elizabeth made sure to recognize Philip's place by her side. She announced that he would have a position of honor and importance next to her in every official matter, unless the law specifically said otherwise. She also arranged for him to serve as regent for their son, Charles. if anything happened to her while he was still a child. Parliament passed this into law in 1953. Despite what many people believed or speculated about their marriage, Elizabeth and Philip remained closely connected. Their bond was strong, even during difficult times. They supported each other through every challenge that came with life on the throne. Years later, during her Diamond Jubilee in 2012, Elizabeth spoke about how much Philip had meant to her. She described how he had always been there, steady and reliable through decades of public service. Philip's role as consort was demanding, yet he carried it with dignity and commitment. He joined the Queen at major events, including the opening of parliaments around the world, formal state dinners, and countless official visits. One of his most notable contributions was during the Queen's coronation. As chairman of the Coronation Commission, he oversaw important details of the event and even became the first royal family member to fly in a helicopter, visiting troops involved in the ceremony. Though he was not crowned himself, he took a solemn oath to support Elizabeth fully, pledging his loyalty in the grand ceremony. In 1953 and 1954, the Queen and Philip undertook a 6-month tour of the Commonwealth, representing the Crown across nations. Their children, still very young, stayed behind in Britain. This was a common tradition at the time, though it came with emotional costs. Still, the tour helped strengthen the Queen's role and Philip's support in the eyes of the public. Prince Philip had received an official annuity since 1990, amounting to £359,000 per year to cover his duties and expenses. This allowance was untouched by newer financial reforms that affected other areas of royal spending. Every penny went toward his official responsibilities, and if anything remained unused, it would be taxed. In reality, Philip used the entire amount for his work. Through all the years, changes, and duties, Philip remained a steady presence beside Elizabeth. His journey into royal life had not been easy. He had sacrificed much and adapted constantly, yet he had always stood with his wife. Their story was not just about tradition and ceremony, but also about personal strength, loyalty, and quiet devotion. However, their life was not without controversy. Rumors about an illicit affair. In the 1950s, quiet whispers began to stir about an alleged affair between Prince Philip and a Russian ballerina. These rumors floated through royal circles and crept into the British press, creating waves of curiosity and doubt. The woman at the center of the gossip was Galina Ulanova, a highly admired and graceful ballerina from the Soviet Union. She was praised not only for her talent on stage, but also for her poise and elegance. Her reputation stretched far beyond Russia, and her name carried a kind of mystique that made the story more compelling. Even though no solid proof ever came out to support the claims, the idea of such an affair captured the attention of many. The timing made the story all the more sensitive, as Britain and the Soviet Union were already walking a thin line in their diplomatic relationship. The thought of Prince Philip being involved with a prominent figure from the Soviet Union added a layer of political tension. Some insiders speculated that the British government may have stepped in to make sure the story never gained too much ground, possibly to protect the royal family and avoid any international embarrassment. If such a relationship had been real, it wouldn't have just hurt the royal family. It could have raised serious concerns about national security. The impact of the rumors wasn't only seen in newspapers or gossip columns. They reportedly created a strain behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace. According to some sources close to the royal household, Queen Elizabeth was deeply affected by the story. It wasn't just a matter of public image. It cut deeper, perhaps touching something personal and emotional. Even so, she stayed silent. She didn't respond, didn't let her feelings show, and instead carried on with her role. This was in keeping with her calm and composed nature, especially in the face of controversy. She had learned to live with public speculation and often chose dignity over reaction. Prince Philip, for his part, never openly addressed the rumors either. The silence from both sides only added fuel to the public's imagination. Still, not everyone believed the story. Some royal observers brushed it off as a fantasy created to stir drama, but others saw it differently. They viewed it as a sign that Prince Philip, though loyal to his role, might have felt trapped by the formality and limits of royal life. These thoughts fed into the idea that he longed for something more than ceremonial duties and endless protocols. Their son, Prince Andrew, stood firmly by his father. He always spoke about Prince Philip as a man of honor, someone who took his responsibilities seriously and valued his family above all else. His public statements defending his father never waned. Still, his support wasn't enough to stop the growing curiosity. People continued to wonder, continued to search for answers that never came. The mystery never faded. It just settled into the background of royal history like a shadow that never quite disappears. The story of the alleged affair, whether true or invented, brought attention to the deeper struggles inside Elizabeth and Philip's marriage. From the outside, they looked strong and united, but like any long relationship, especially one lived under constant public view, theirs had moments of stress and distance. While Elizabeth was known for her patience and ability to keep her emotions in check, those close to her noticed how certain events left a quiet mark on her. She rarely let it show, but it didn't mean she wasn't affected. With time, it seemed that the couple came to an understanding. They focused on their shared responsibilities, choosing to place duty above personal wounds. Their relationship might not have been filled with endless joy, but it was steady. They stood by each other through major world events, family changes, and growing public pressure. Together they built a partnership not based on perfection, but on loyalty and resilience. The rumor about the ballerina stood as just one of many trials they faced. This phase remained one of the most whispered stories in royal history. It showed how even those at the highest level of society are still touched by human challenges, doubt, suspicion, and the need for trust. Their children, too, reflected different sides of their parents' union. Princess Anne understood her father's restless spirit, while Prince Andrew remained loyal and protective. Their views gave more depth to the story of Elizabeth and Philip, offering small pieces of the bigger picture. Despite all the rumors, silences, and uncertainties, Elizabeth and Philip stayed together. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it endured. They shared a deep commitment to their roles, their country, and to each other. Through decades of change, they chose to walk side by side, not because they had no other choice, but because they believed in the strength of their bond. Their story, shaped by public duty and private struggles, remains a powerful example of dedication in the face of life's many storms. Living apart. In 2017, Prince Philip brought his long public life to a close by officially stepping away from royal duties at the age of 96. It was the end of an era that had stretched over decades. He had supported Queen Elizabeth II with strength and dedication, attending countless royal events and traveling extensively. But with age catching up, he decided it was finally time to slow down and enjoy a more peaceful, private life. This decision led him to leave the busy royal palaces and settle down at Wood Farm. Wood Farm, a small, quiet cottage on the Sandringham estate, was not grand or luxurious compared to the royal residences he had known most of his life. It was modest and simple, surrounded by nature, fields, and the calm atmosphere of the countryside. For Prince Philip, this was exactly what he needed. He had always loved being outdoors and enjoyed working with his hands. At Wood Farm, he could paint, read, take long walks, and spend his days in peace. It was here, away from the constant attention and demands of public life, that he spent his final years. The choice to move to Wood Farm was made after careful consideration. Private discussions reportedly took place within the royal family to understand Philip's desires and how best to honor them. His daughter, Princess Anne, later shared that the arrangement had been accepted by both her parents. They had found a way to respect each other's needs while still staying close as a couple. The Queen continued with her responsibilities in London, while Philip moved to the country to enjoy his retirement in his own way. Princess Anne made it clear that the move did not come from any trouble in the marriage. It was simply a practical step that suited both of them at that stage in their lives. The Queen's position required her to remain at Buckingham Palace, constantly involved in royal affairs. Prince Philip, on the other hand, valued privacy and enjoyed being free from ceremony. Their decision reflected the strength of their bond, built on decades of understanding, compromise, and shared duty. The arrangement allowed them both to live the lives they needed, without strain or unhappiness. Anne explained that her father had always been an independent spirit, someone who preferred a less formal environment whenever possible. Though the official version of events focused on mutual understanding and personal preference, some palace insiders hinted at other reasons behind Philip's move. These different accounts have created some confusion over the years. One suggestion was that he had grown tired of the strict rules and security measures at Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. The presence of the Queen's Guard, with its constant routines and heavy protocol, may have started to feel too rigid for someone like Philip. He had never been fond of unnecessary formality, and likely found the freedom at Wood Farm refreshing. While some sources claimed he left by choice, others quietly hinted that the pressures of royal life may have nudged him toward that decision. While the public image painted a calm and peaceful transition, behind the scenes, the story might have been more complex. At times, even the royal family's statements seemed to change slightly. Initially, the move was described as a simple matter of personal preference, a shared agreement. Later, there were suggestions that the Queen's staff may have supported the idea of Philip stepping back, possibly to reduce friction and allow both royals to live more comfortably in their own environments. Princess Anne's words added a deeply human element to the story. She talked about her father not just as a royal figure, but as a person who had his own identity. Apart from being the Queen's husband, he had a clear idea of how he wanted to be remembered, as someone who had served faithfully, but also remained true to himself. That wish seemed to guide his final years, spent in quiet reflection and surrounded by the things he loved. Even as rumors floated around, those close to the royal family continued to highlight how respectful and thoughtful the arrangement had been. There were no signs of bitterness or disagreement. Instead, it was a quiet decision made out of care for one another. Both Philip and the Queen had spent decades placing their duties above all else. In this final chapter, they found a way to balance responsibility with personal comfort. The Queen continued to serve the crown, and Philip enjoyed his hard-earned rest in the countryside. Prince Philip's retirement and his life at Wood Farm marked a graceful end to a remarkable journey. It showed that even those in the highest positions can seek simplicity, peace, and a place to call their own. His choice was not about leaving his family or abandoning duty. It was about embracing the final stage of life with dignity, honesty, and a strong sense of self. In doing so, he reminded the world that behind the crown, there was a man who simply wanted to enjoy the quiet beauty of the life he had earned. The final years, coming back together. When the world was beginning to shut down because of the pandemic in early 2020, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip quietly made the decision to come together at Windsor Castle. This choice brought them back under the same roof after spending several years apart. While the world was facing fear and uncertainty, the Queen and Prince Philip found a peaceful moment of togetherness. They stayed away from everyone else, living in quiet isolation. For a couple in the final stretch of their lives, this unexpected reunion became a deeply meaningful time. It gave them a chance to share daily life once again, to reconnect not just as monarchs but as husband and wife. Their children watched closely during this period. They saw a new closeness forming between their parents, a connection that had softened with time. After years of living in different homes, their mother and father were once again sharing meals, conversations, and long hours together. It felt like a return to something familiar. It reminded them of the bond that had always existed, even when life and duty had pulled their parents apart. The reunion, though brought on by crisis, brought quiet joy to the royal family, a gentle reminder of love that still remained. The reasons why Prince Philip had chosen to live separately in the later years of his life were never fully explained. But whatever the reasons, the months they spent together at Windsor seemed to bridge the distance that had grown between them over time. As the final months of Prince Philip's life unfolded, a sense of peace seemed to settle around the couple. Their son, Charles, remembered the still moments they shared. Often, they would simply sit together without speaking, letting the quiet speak for itself. There was no need to say much. Their long history was enough. Even as Prince Philip's health declined, he held on to his dry humor and sharp mind. He continued to make the Queen smile, offering her comfort just by being there. Charles could see the deep respect they held for one another, even in the silence. They didn't explain things or revisit past choices, but their actions showed a quiet acceptance. They had learned to honor each other's decisions, knowing that love doesn't always need explanations. Their marriage, stretching across more than 7 decades, was never without struggle. Life in the public eye brought heavy responsibilities. Being part of the royal family meant constant pressure, always performing, always present. Yet through it all, Elizabeth and Philip stayed side by side. Their bond was tested many times, but it endured. There were arguments, distance, and personal differences, but underneath it all was a strong partnership. Those close to them could see the strength in their connection. It wasn't always warm or open, but it was steady. It was built on shared values, a sense of duty, and a quiet kind of devotion that held them together, even when they were far apart. When Prince Philip passed away, the loss was deeply felt by the entire royal family. It was more than just the loss of a beloved family member. It marked the end of a generation, the closing of a long chapter. Prince Andrew spoke of the moment with great emotion. There was sadness, of course, but there was also pride. His father had faced life with strength, and he had faced his end the same way. Princess Anne, who had always been close to her father, remembered their last talk. He spoke clearly, even at the end. He told her how he wanted to be remembered. He asked for no mourning, only gratitude for the life he had lived. His words reflected a man who had accepted the end with calm dignity. He had always stayed connected to his family, even when he was apart from them. The Queen and Prince Philip were married for 73 years. It was a partnership shaped by change, duty, and the demands of royal life. Yet through everything, they stood as one of the most well-known and admired couples in modern history. Their union was not perfect, but it was powerful. It showed the world what commitment could look like under the most difficult circumstances. They supported one another quietly without needing to prove anything. Their story became a symbol of endurance, of a love that learned how to adapt, bend, and survive. Even though Prince Philip chose to live away from the Queen for much of his later years, their connection never broke. That distance only made their final time together at Windsor more special. For their children and for the world watching, it reminded everyone of the lasting strength of their bond. It wasn't grand displays or constant togetherness that defined their relationship. It was the understanding, the trust, and the quiet love that had grown stronger with time. In the end, their story stood not just as a royal legacy, but as a deeply human one. What are your thoughts on the bond between Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.